damn it. Hey everybody, my guest tonight was a dear friend of mine named Ryan Hargis. He is an artist, an AV technician, and an investor. And while we didn't quite scratch the surface on a number of things, we had a great conversation about monetary policy and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So, check it out. Here's Ryan Hargis. You know, I've had a lot of conversations with you about money and various forms of currency. And so I wanted to discuss with you this thing called Bitcoin and see if you could demystify it a little bit for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I think before we even go into that, I kind of like want to focus on really like what currency and money is.
Sure.
I think that's like a better place to start. I know that like for me, I started just kind of looking into, I don't even know why I started looking into alternative currencies, or I guess I started looking into more so conspiracy theories, and that's what led me down it. But, one person that I really focused on and really got me interested in alternative currencies was Mike Maloney. I don't know if you've heard much about him. I might have talked about him before.
Yeah.
But he's a bullion dealer. He's like one of the biggest bullion dealers in the U.S. And you can just buy precious metals online. It's actually like pretty simple. It's like all insured, and you just order them online, and they get sent straight to your house and everything. It's a pretty good deal. But yeah, like he's got these videos called the Hidden Secrets of Money, and they start off with really just like a fundamental understanding of what currency and money is. And like a good place to start even before that is like understanding the differences between currency and money. And he tries to like implement that into everything he says, like rather than saying that the dollars that we interact with are money, they're technically their currency. And so I guess, I've written down a bunch of notes just because these are kind of complex things and it will be easier to keep my mind there.
Sure.
But he goes on and says that currency is a medium of exchange, a unit of account. It's portable, durable, divisible, and then it's also fungible. And so I'm sure everyone knows what those things are besides maybe fungible, which is each unit is the same as the next unit. So kind of going into like any dollar that's in your pocket is the same as the dollar that's in my pocket. And that's currency. But then what money would be a store of value, or a store of value over time.
Okay.
And so if you kind of understand that like the dollars that you and I interact with aren't a store of value over time, they're a store of value in like the short span of time. Like we use them to buy things. But because of the system that we live in and work in, which I'm sure we'll get a little bit more in depth into, they've been decreasing over time. And so they're actually losing value since the creation of the US dollar. And so I think that's like a really fundamental point that people need to understand. I shouldn't say people need to understand, but people should try to open their mind to. Mm-hmm. You know, because when you hear alternative currencies, a lot of people would ask the question, you know, why do I need to use them, especially in the US? Like, we can go into any banking system, any bank branch and open up an account. We have PayPal, Venmo, you know, all of these other ones, but they're all backed by the same currency, right? They're all still using the US dollar. And so it's like, why, if I have this currency that, you know, we've also never had any type of currency collapse, really, in a sense. You know, some people experience it on a daily basis, and we don't really ever experience that. And so it's like, why would I interact with these? If you actually kind of step back and start looking at how these things are created and also how they control us, you know, it kind of opens your eyes to really understanding what is money and what is currency.
Okay, so on that note, I know I've asked you this before. What is the downside to one global currency?
The downside to one global currency. I don't, I don't know if I could really say that like one global currency, there's a downside. I guess in my eyes, it would just, I guess I would think that it would create like, not as much I don't know, maybe not as much like interaction between people. There's not as much creativity surrounding it. And I don't know, I only say that because I just think that there are so many, that, but I guess I can't say if it would create that because we don't really have like a one currency in the world. Yeah, I can't say that I really have like a strong, like this is the reason why it could work, but I haven't really tried, I haven't tested that theory either. But
okay, so do you see cryptocurrency replacing forms of paper money?
Paper money specifically, or like fiat currency? Because I would say fiat currency.
And so, before we get into that, can you explain what fiat currency is?
Yeah, so fiat currency. I guess I probably won't give you like a specific definition. If someone like looked it up, it might be a little bit different. But fiat currency is money that's created by. I mean, I'll start with our currency. So our U.S. currency is a fiat currency, and it's created by the Federal Reserve. And again, like I can't explain these. I understand them to a portion of it to actually like get it. But if you go, like if someone's really interested, I would highly recommend watching Hidden Secrets of Money by Mike Maloney, because he literally breaks it down fundamentally and actually understanding like how from the point of the Federal Reserve, using bonds to then bankers buy it and using IOUs and like all this other complex ridiculousness that creates money out of thin air. So, I mean, fiat currency is really like the money which we interact with, but it's also created by the Federal Reserve. And
so it's any type of money created by and for a government, or by a government for its people. So you could say the euro is fiat. You could say the dollar is fiat. The yen, basically any nationalized money system. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Again, I'm not going to hit like the exact definition about it, but
so what would be the opposite of fiat currency then? Like if you barter and trade?
Yeah, totally. Like getting into precious metals, right? So precious metals are, and again, it's kind of coming back to like fiat currency compared to money, which money has a store of value over time. So, and it's also not manipulated. That's the big thing, the big comparison between a fiat currency compared to money is that it's not, you're not able to manipulate it in the sense of with fiat currencies right now, there's an endless printing of it. And so it allows the powers that be, the people that are able to create that, to create as much of it as they want over time. And so that's, again, a reason why the dollar has decreased in its value since its, creation, because there's a continual creation of it more. And, thinking about like some of those pieces would one be just like the printing of it to have more of it, and also like I guess an example of that would be quantitative easing, which is just like the creation of more liquidity to be pumped into the system to prop it up. And so it's kind of, that's getting into something a little bit different, but it's the manipulation that people are able to create more currency without actually having to do anything, quotations, do anything. I'm sure like a lot of people say, well, there is a lot of doing that happens. We're using all of these specific ways of creating it. But in the end, it's just creating fake currency.
Well, and it used to be backed by gold, correct? Mm-hmm. And it no longer is.
Yeah. So, that's a good place to start too. So again, coming back to Mike Maloney's videos, I would highly, highly recommend just watching those. But kind of getting into what kind of changed our timeline, and something that I've tried to understand more about is the Bretton Woods system. So I don't know if you know much about Bretton Woods system. Mm-hmm. So basically around like the end of World War II, France was buying a lot of goods from us because they were at war. And so we were able to take all of that, everything that they were buying, they were paying for in gold. And so this is a short version of it too. It's much more complex and there's a lot more to it. But we basically ended up having like 2/3 of the world's gold reserves, huge amount of gold. And so, sorry, I'm going to look at my notes here. So around that time, we were taking in all this gold, and we were actually selling, like giving out US dollars mm-hmm. for people's, like TVs and cars and all that kind of stuff. And this guy, Charles de Gaulle, who was the president of France, kind of realized what was going on at that time and ended up seeing that we were taking all this gold in and giving out dollars, and we were supposed to be on... we were basically supposed to back it all by gold, but we were actually creating more of it. And so he realized that we were basically taking advantage over other people. And so he ended up starting to take back gold, because we also, because of this, we also allowed people to exchange dollars back for gold. And so he ended up taking all his gold back, and other countries saw that this was going on. And so they started doing the same thing. And so in, I think it was, 1971, Nixon terminated the convertibility of dollars into gold, because if he wouldn't have done that, we would have ended up having no gold in our system. And so, again, it's if everyone would have been able to take all of the gold back, there would have been a problem, and basically it would have crashed the economy, because the U.S. dollar within the Bretton Woods system, the U.S. dollar was tied to gold, and all other currencies were then tied to the U.S. dollar. And so if the U.S. dollar ended up collapsing because it didn't have any gold backing it, all other currencies would have collapsed too. And so Nixon in 1971 ended up wouldn't allow people to convert dollars into gold, which is kind of a strange concept, right? Like, I don't know why people around then didn't decide that, or realize that the U.S. was printing more dollars than they actually had for gold, mm-hmm. and why they didn't, actually get angry about that. I don't know. I wasn't really around back then, so couldn't say that if people did get angry or not. But
so you're saying there was a significant change in the system with Nixon in 71.
Yeah, sorry. So after 71, we basically went off the Bretton Woods system. And so we ended up completely cutting ties from gold, and to end up going to just floating cash, or I guess floating fiat currencies. I don't know if floating would be the right term, but basically just straight fiat currencies that weren't actually backed by anything physical, which is kind of an interesting concept too, of why were we once a part of this system where we actually had some physical product physical money that couldn't just be created out of nothing. We had to have a certain amount of it to create these dollars. At least that's what people were saying. I think it was in the Bretton Woods system, the US dollar. So 1 ounce of gold would be priced at $35 for 1 ounce of gold. And so realistically, they were trying to have that for every ounce of gold, there was, an equivalent of $35 US. And so once that was, once we went away from actually being backed by gold, it was just, they're just creating money that's not actually backed by anything. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that makes sense.
Which is crazy. Because it seems like it would have to have some sort of inherent value, but it doesn't. And I don't think people understand that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a lot of people say, I mean, that it's, backed up by the US, but it's all just a confidence game, right?
Yeah.
It's all just confidence that I can walk over to Safeway. Excuse me. I can walk over to Safeway and, use my dollars for buying a thing of eggs.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what happens when that confidence isn't there anymore? And I think we're starting to kind of get to that point. But I don't think people really understand what that actually means and
mm-hmm.
what can actually change and how that's going to actually change.
Yeah, because I mean, for our entire lives and longer, there's always been, I don't know if the right word is respect, but there's always been like a trust in the dollar, that it was powerful and that it would always be accountable for itself. And it's hard to imagine what it would be like if it wasn't. Like,
mm-hmm.
I mean, we've had this conversation before. If the dollar crashed and people weren't they didn't have faith in it anymore, and a different currency became like the global standard, it would
mm-hmm.
We can't even imagine what that would be like.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've been living pretty good for the time being. Also like coming back to not going through currency crises and really any form where like a lot of other countries experience that, with just inflation and just different price changes. We don't experience that really at all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of it comes from just this Bretton Woods agreement, where it was like, well, since there's so many dollars anyways, at least from my understanding, it seems like there's so many dollars anyways, and we have most of the gold, like we'll back it by this, and you can trust in us that it's going to be backed by this. And obviously that was completely incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
If you go and watch Charles de Gaulle talk about it, he basically tells people that we've been fooled, in one sense or another. That and it's interesting too, because then you go and listen to Nixon's speech when he's talking about this. He's telling these other countries to like trust that they're going to do the right thing in the future, which is it's incorrect. It's just lies. So.
Yeah. Well, and war is the best profit driver for private corporations and anybody at the top. The struggle to constantly be at war or go to war will never go away, because there's so much money to be made from other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Moving in. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think even more so to be at war and not be in war, right? Like if other people are fighting and you're able to profit on that, that's like the best thing. And that's kind of what happened, where we weren't even getting into the war until later, but we were able to profit off it so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we can go to some of the notes I had from the other day. So I was watching the movie Zeitgeist, which is on YouTube, and it's great. The first scene dives into Christianity and how it could possibly be based off a number of other religions. And then it goes into 9/11, I believe. And then the third portion is about the Federal Reserve. And then there's also an addendum, Zeitgeist addendum. And so basically the story that Peter Joseph tells in these movies is about... So when the United States was founded, I believe that the first bank was just the first national bank, and it lasted until, I believe, 1812, and then there were issues, and they started a second national bank, and that made it up until the time of Jackson. And Andrew Jackson, I believe it was in 1835, he was the first and only president to pay off the debt.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, he was a very tough personality and interested in doing what he thought was right, and he didn't care what anybody else thought, and so he was strongly against the banking system. And after that collapsed, that second bank, there was no central bank in the United States until the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. And so what this movie Zeitgeist goes on to talk about is how the Rockefellers and the Morgans, the Warburgs, and the Rothschild family, they created rumors that the banks were insolvent, and this created hysteria and mass withdrawals from smaller banks. And it was the panic of 1907. And so you've got the general population freaking out and pulling their money out of the banks based on these rumors that these super wealthy people created.
Yeah.
And after that, I mean, they had various people in Congress that could pass things that they wanted them to. And one of them was Nelson Aldrich. And he, I mean, I'd have to look it up again. He was, I believe he was a senator. He was involved somewhere higher up in one way or another, but he was able to draft the idea of the Federal Reserve. And there was a meeting on Jekyll Island in 1910. And you know about this, right? I think you told me about it.
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. I haven't dived like super deep into it. G. Edward Griffin wrote a book, which I haven't had the chance to read yet. I was actually thinking about that today, but I should order it. But he wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, and apparently it goes all over.
Yeah, you were telling me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get it.
So yeah, all these super wealthy, influential people had this meeting, and it was so secret. The bankers traveling there disguised their names so that no one would even know that they were going.
Yeah.
And so after this meeting on Jekyll Island in 1910, they drafted the Federal Reserve Act, and in exchange for campaign support, they helped Woodrow Wilson, get into office if he agreed to pass this Federal Reserve Act. And so he was in cahoots with those wealthy individuals. And so just a few days before Christmas, I believe it was on the 23rd of December, 1913, most lawmakers had already gone home. And so I was trying to look this up today, and I don't know what the answer is on this. Maybe you do, maybe not. When you're in Congress and you're not there to vote, what happens to your vote?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I think...
But it is interesting, though, to think about it.
Right? Like, it was the perfect thing for these guys who were scheming on this shit to do. They waited until right before Christmas.
Yeah, everyone's gone.
Everybody took off. And so I think what happens is your vote you don't have a vote.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter.
It just doesn't matter. And so the majority that you need, 2/3 or whatever, you can accomplish that a lot more if your team is still there to vote and everybody else took off. And so I'm assuming that's what happened with this. And so, yeah, they pushed the Federal Reserve Act through, created this new central bank, and it was basically a method for these people to control our entire financial system.
Yeah, definitely.
And from there, I feel like I've been talking too much. From there, along with that came the federal income tax, which it sounds crazy now to think about or to talk about that there was no federal income tax before 1913. So you know how much people hate paying taxes. You can only imagine how pissed they were when they're like,
when it was implemented.
Yeah, like now we got to pay 25% of our income to the federal government? What?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also like a thing that I talk to people about a lot, especially, kind of like closer relationship to me. I'm not against paying taxes. I don't think people should be against paying taxes in some way, shape, and form, but I think when it's not shown to you where this money is going, when it's not audited, when these places they don't go through audits, they don't like show what they're spending the money on. It just, it doesn't, there's no trust there. All the trust is gone. And so why would I want to end up paying into a system and helping out a system where it's trustless, right?
Exactly.
And it just creates, bad taste in my mouth. And that's not a society that I want to live in. And that's a society that I'm trying to slowly work my way out of to a more trustful, relationship between people. And I think that's also where alternative funds start to have their value of, being able to have a trusted system where you don't need these third parties to trust to trust you and I. If you and I want to interact or transact, I should say, we don't need to have a third system that's making that happen with some of the alternatives that are coming out today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have this juxtaposition of a central bank created by some of the most wealthy individuals that we've ever seen in the thought process of controlling our currency and profiting more. And so you have these people here, and then you have this new thing that shows up in the last 8 or 10 years, which is cryptocurrency. And like you were just saying, in that world, there's no middleman. You're sending money from me to you. There's no bank involved. There's no Wall Street exec, anybody pinching pennies from our transaction. And so when we talk about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, that's what makes me think it's the next thing. But anybody who has a stake in the current system is going to do whatever they can to keep crypto from happening.
Yeah, or even create their own crypto, That's the other thing of creating. I mean, I guess it'd more so be just creating some type of digital currency, because that's another part of it that you hear kind of going around, where it's like we're moving more towards a digital currency. I mean, you probably don't really interact with paper money. I interact with it a little bit, but not like it used to be. And so really, there's fundamentals, I guess, that people need to understand about like digital currencies in general. And Andreas Antonopoulos goes over those fundamentals really well. He calls them the 5 pillars. So the first pillar is open blockchain. Anyone can see what is going on within the system. So it's, I guess, open source. You can actually understand, but also from that point, anyone can build upon that. They can take those pieces and make something better, or completely change it and start a whole new one. So being able to have open is a big part. It's like you and I aren't able to, I would say we aren't able to take any type of, large banking system like MasterCard or something, and we're not able to see exactly how that works and exactly what they're doing. It's not an open system where we can really see what's going on. And that's kind of same, with like the tax system. We're not able to see what's actually going on within that and what's open about it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I can just go over these real fast because it'll give like a baseline of, I guess, a good place to start with looking at cryptocurrencies and understanding them. So he says the second pillar is borderless. So a borderless system knows no national borders whatsoever. It exists across the globe, the globe, and is accessible to basically any person. So you don't have to, just because you're in a different place, just because you're a different nationality, just because, whoever you are, which, it has its pros and cons too. Like that means anyone who wants to use it can interact with it, right? So it doesn't, like if you look at the U.S. currency, and it's all orchestrated from the U.S., right? You really don't have any interaction from other countries about what's going on with it, whereas a borderless system has no bounds. It's everywhere, which is awesome, because then you have all these other people who think differently or who interact differently with the world who are still able to transact, get different ideas too.
Sure.
The third is neutral. So a truly neutral blockchain does not favor any one individual or entity over another. Yes, and some of these, I would say, definitely like listening to him talk about them is he goes way more in depth about them. And some of them, I mean, I don't even like I'll go through the fourth one is censorship resistant.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like a transaction entered onto the blockchain is very hard to alter. So having that censorship resistance where you can see what's going on, someone can't change it. You and I, if we transact with each other, that will always be there. We can see that happened. Someone can't create these fake pieces of it.
Sure.
And it's also like something for us to say that it happened in time. The last one is public. And this one was kind of difficult. I think there's multiple pieces to it. I think being public is, people are able to view it and see it. And I guess it kind of comes back to the part of being open. But it's also like, I have this understanding of being public and everyone can see it, but that also means that, even let's take our government, for instance, they can see it too, right? And so they can look at what you're transacting with. And that kind of comes back to what people need to think about when they're interacting with digital currencies. Bitcoin was supposed to be, or I guess it wasn't actually supposed to be, but people thought it was this completely anonymous cryptocurrency. And, what we're learning now that it's come out, and people are able to basically look at addresses that are on the blockchain and understand different points to those addresses because they're put into this network and everyone can see them. And so I think that's the part where people have to be careful. If someone has hundreds of millions of dollars and somehow they have an account linked to that, if you go and sign up for some online exchange and you funnel a ton of money into that, and then not right away, like obviously it's not like someone can just look up your address and see exactly who you are, but there's little pieces that start to connect those dots. And so I think that's where people need to be careful about thinking that these things are completely anonymous. And, again, it comes back to the point of fungibility. Bitcoin is not fungible. It's not every one Bitcoin is equal to the other Bitcoin. Within the last few years, the US government has not allowed people to interact with certain addresses, certain Bitcoin addresses, because they're linked to nefarious things, whatever, drug dealing, I don't know, whatever they say, terrorism, whatever it is. And so that being said, it's not true money. It's not something that, it's not fungible. And so I'm sure that there's people, of course, there's people out there that would say that there's different applications that are building upon it to try to make it more secure. And something like the Lightning Network is doing that. And it's a whole nother realm that you'd have to get someone who really understands it to talk about it a lot more than I do. But it's starting to get there in the sense of having more privacy. And so, there are alternatives out there that are more private. And it's interesting too. When you read Satoshi Nakamoto, who's the person, entity, whatever group who created it, I've read through a little bit of it, of just like the conversations between other developers when it was first starting. And I think like what I got from it was people need to be open to other ones that come along, and that maybe these first digital currencies or cryptocurrencies that were created, maybe they needed to be public, and they needed to be open, and they needed to show people every part of it so that people could trust in it. Mm-hmm. Because if you just directly came out with one that there wasn't trust there, and you couldn't, or maybe there was trust there and it worked fine, but people couldn't see how it worked, people would be skeptical, right? And so I think if you show that there's trust there and you let people view that these things can happen, we can send transactions to each other without this third party, and it does work. And then being able to say, okay, now we're going to do that, but we're going to do it in a sense where you can't see anyone's identity. You're not going to see anyone's amounts of transaction. Only between the two people that send it to each other can they see that. Then you have like, we know it works, but now we're going to put it into this other one where it doesn't show all this other information. And I think that's like the key point of building upon it. And, you know, I'm sure, again, there's people that say they have that in Bitcoin. But I think keeping an open mind to like other ones that come along and other ones that are there is something people should be open to.
So let's break down what blockchain is in the most simple terms that you can imagine. What does it mean for me to go on the Cash App or to go on Coinbase and purchase one Bitcoin? What does that mean when I make that transaction?
Yeah, so Bitcoin blockchain would be a ledger. So it's a and again, I would highly recommend. There's James Corbett creates a video that's called the Bitcoin Psyop. I'd highly recommend people watching that because it's a complex system that, you know, is difficult to articulate. But, you know, it's a ledger, right? And so it's a accounting all of these transactions that are coming through, and you have miners who are taking in those transactions, the ones that come in, and they are basically solidifying through mathematical problems with machines that are working on these problems. And these basically they're working to solve one problem, and there's so many of them. And so it also depends on the amount of people that are in the network and how many people are running, and it's trying to keep it at 10 minutes of basically saying, hey, here's the next block in the chain. We're going to solidify this block in the chain every 10 minutes. And if there's more people, it gets more complicated. And if there's less people, it gets less complicated to try and keep it at 10 minutes of solidifying that block of the ledger of basically saying, these are all the transactions that have come through. And so, yeah, I guess
okay, so this is how I view it, and tell me if I'm wrong. I see it as, and this is the way I think I've read it, or it's been explained to me in various ways, the benefit of owning a digital currency is there's bits and pieces. Let's pretend it's $1. Let's pretend it's one Bitcoin dollar. Mm-hmm. There's a little tiny sliver on this computer and a little tiny sliver on that computer and over there, and it's all spread out everywhere. And throughout the network, all of those computers communicate with everything, and they say there's a piece over there, there's a piece over there, and they are able to consolidate that information and say Cody Maxwell owns one Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's more so it's being like when you purchase, you know, your piece of that Bitcoin, it's being sent out to the network to tell other pieces of people who are playing within that network, hey, this is the amount I have. And they're looking at if that's true, if you got those cryptocurrencies the correct way to play into the Bitcoin system. I like to look at it as like a game of like playing in the system. If you do that correctly with the rules that are given within the white paper, right? If you want to interact with this game, you got to play by these rules. And if you do that correctly, it's sent out to the rest of the network to say, hey, this is the amount I have. So when you then transact with another one, it's again sent out to the network, and those are all taken in. And it's building upon these like blocks of saying, hey, these are the transactions that are legit. This is what's happening. But within that, there's also the people who are solidifying all those, and small amounts of cryptocurrencies are basically given to people because of their mining, because of the work that they're putting into it
to pulling it from the system.
Yeah, well, to solidify it within the system to make sure that it's all correct. And,
Sure.
Yeah.
And so that's the other crazy thing to me is that how many coins are there? 21 million?
There will be, yeah.
There will be, yes. And so this is the part that blows my mind. They know how many there are. There's a finite amount, which is what makes it, in my mind, such a valuable thing. Because anytime you have a finite amount of anything, the demand will be far greater than, for example, the US dollar, which they will always create more of. If there's only 10 bananas and somebody gives you a banana, you're killing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If there's 21 Bitcoin and you own one of those, and that becomes the global currency, you have significant buying power for the things that you need to get.
Yeah.
And so the coins don't exist. All of the coins don't exist yet. They're available in, what was it? 2140?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's close to that.
So that part boggles my mind, is that they know how many there are based on mathematics. They know when they will all be available. And I don't know where I'm going with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think something that I think a lot about is, well, one, if someone's interested in getting like a part of some cryptocurrency, one, you should obviously do your research, right? And you should try to understand why you're doing it, right? Like, are you just buying into it just because you want to make a bunch of money? Are you buying into it because you pay Wells Fargo every month 5% or whatever bank to send money over here and over there, and you can save a part of it? Are you buying into it because you're just like, oh, this is cool, let's check it out and see what it is? Are you wanting to exit from the system? So asking yourself those questions, but I think too, like, really understanding that you should never go all in, right? Like, and this is at least my opinion. I'm not going to put my entire life savings, right? I'm not going to put everything I ever know, because it is something new, right? Like, you do need to be, at least in my opinion, you need to be careful with any type of investment. And so I think with these new systems, we don't know what's going to happen, right? Like, people can speculate and people can say, this is the best one ever. There's a lot of maximalists out there that say, hey, this is the best one. This is the best one. But, we really don't know. We don't know how, like, a depression or, a recession is really going to interact with these types of things. They haven't experienced that. They're only 10 years old, right? Or maybe a little bit more than that.
For sure.
And so I think keeping that in mind is good too. And I think that's where kind of understanding the value of something like precious metals really comes into play, because we literally have, such a long history of these, elements being used as money. And I think that's a big part of why, like, what people don't understand is, like, why would I use this coin? I'm not going to go take it to Safeway and buy something, right? That's not really the point. But I can take a portion of my money and I can put it into these elements. And at certain times, they fluctuate in price. And at certain times, I can kind of navigate my financial system to maybe mitigate what's happening in this fiat currency that I'm playing in and be able to protect myself. And so I view them as wealth insurance. That's what a lot of people talk about as, you have insurance for your car. Why not have insurance for your money? That this system that we play in, modern monetary theory is what it's called. This system that we interact in, having insurance to protect us when these downturns happen is extremely beneficial, and also can be extremely profitable. And so, but it's a fluctuation, right? Like, they're gonna go up and they're gonna go down, and trying to understand that and being able to profit off it is awesome. But also, over time, I guess precious metals have increased, whereas over time, a fiat currency has decreased. And so it seems like it's a simple thing to look at different charts and to see that and to say, hey, with over, the last 100 years, gold has increased in value continuously, and the US dollar has decreased in value continuously, but it's more complicated than that. And so
let's eliminate everything and all there is gold. How do you feel about that?
Today, I don't know. It depends. There's a lot of interesting things that are happening. There's this company called Gold Money. I believe it's Gold Money. And they, a lot of other companies do this too, but they basically allow you to hold precious metals in a vault around the world. They have like 12 different places you can hold them. And you can actually basically have a credit card that you're able to buy things with, and they'll deduct value from that. And it's all based in precious metals. And you can also, if someone else has a account with them, you can send precious metals between each other. And so it's, again, it's coming back to this point of like, it depends on how you want to interact with it. It depends on if you want someone else to hold it, all that kind of stuff.
That's still a digital transaction though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I think that's the benefit of it, right?
You don't have to actually physically have it.
Yeah. And obviously there's pros and cons to that too, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think this is where it comes down to diversifying, right? Understanding the benefits of, having some here, having some there, interacting with, like, of course I'm going to have to interact with US currency right now. Like that's the place that I live. That's the thing. That's how I have to pay for certain things. Right. But there's also these other alternatives that I can start using, get an idea about. Maybe they're more, if you go, realistically, I think it might be more now, but maybe a few months ago, gold and every other currency besides the US, I can't remember if it's now, was hitting all-time highs, was higher than it's ever been before. So if I took a piece of gold to, Mexico or somewhere, I'm getting more money than I would have at any time in history for that piece. And so maybe it's a good idea to go take that and, I don't know, go buy something down there if I'm going there, right?
Yeah.
Like there's benefits to it all.
Sure. The thing is, like, if you break it down to the lowest level that you can, you need food, you need shelter, you need clothes to stay warm. And so there has to be a system by which you trade things. And as far as I know, there was a point in time where you would, if you were a cobbler, somebody would bring you a chicken and you would offer to fix their shoes,
Mm-hmm.
And there became a point where you had to decide whether or not it was worth your time to do whatever that thing was in return for whatever they were offering you. So the whole human experience is based off of trading your time and skills for something else that someone is offering.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems so crazy that it's gotten to the point that it is now. And you have people that are, that's what bothers me so much about anybody who works in finance, is they're making money off of money.
Mm-hmm.
And they're way smarter than me. And they understand how to do those things. But it seems like such a dishonest profession. Like, you don't know how to milk a cow. You don't know how to build a house. You're crunching numbers off of imaginary shit.
Yeah. Well, you're creating debt, right? It's just debt on other people, and you're profiting off that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a flawed way, and I think once people start to have the passion to understand more about the system that we live in and realize the debt that is created. Throw around giant numbers that are so huge that you can't actually understand what that actually is, right? Like whatever multiple trillions that we're in debt.
But do you think people care? The majority of people just want to buy a new car or get a cool house or buy a new pair of shoes or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll start to care once, once things start to level out. I mean, we can't continue. I mean, we've seen within the last few days that we can't continue to constantly grow, right? Like the stock market can't constantly grow, even though, the Keynesians that run our monetary system try to manipulate it with lowering interest rates. They try to manipulate it with, injecting money into the system. They try to manipulate it with all these ways, and it's been successful, totally. But can that be successful forever?
No,
I mean,
it's unsustainable.
Yeah. So, at what point do people realize that, like, I mean, I guess at the point when, you try to go buy something and it costs multiple thousands of dollars for whatever it is, unfortunately, that's the point when people start to realize that there's a facade there. They're not actually, there's not actually, they're not using money, it's currency.
Yeah.
It's not a store of value. So.
Well, and in this country, that's the point that I don't know that people will reach. The powers that be keep things comfortable enough that you're not quite ready to do the French Revolution,
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a little bit more than a slice of bread.
Mm-hmm.
When the French Revolution happened, those people had nothing. They're fucking pissed. And they freaked out. They overthrew the government. It was two people, or I don't know, a family of people who owned everything, and no one else had anything.
Yeah.
And in this country, I think the game is convincing people, and somebody else has said this a million times, this isn't me. The game is convincing poor people or middle class people that you're one step away from the dream. Mm-hmm. And the dream is unattainable for most people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's that hope. You always think, well, I get that promotion, or I get this thing, or I get that thing, and then, I'll be living on the nice street or whatever. But because it's comfortable and you have that hope, people never give up. And
they always want to obtain it.
Yeah, I mean, they think they're just that close. And so that's what's so disappointing about, like, with the whole political process, in my opinion, is that no one really has it that bad enough where they'll actually freak out and do something.
Yeah, I mean, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, did you hear about South by Southwest? Mm-mm. You know what it is, right? Mm-hmm. In Austin?
Yeah.
All of the major sponsors started pulling out. Mm-hmm. I can hear a bunch of stuff going on in the background.
Yeah, it's Amy.
It's all good. Apple pulled out, Amazon pulled out, Microsoft, all the major players that were involved, they pulled out because of coronavirus, because of the scare or the threat that everyone's going to get sick.
Yeah.
So they canceled South by Southwest, and I read somewhere that it was a $355 billion event for the city. Like, that's how much revenue was generated for the city. Dude, that's significant. That's got to just, like, crush businesses right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's happening everywhere. I mean, I've specifically lost jobs within the last few weeks because of that threat.
Oh, serious?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting what's going on. I mean, I think I've been listening to a lot about it. Specifically, Chris Martenson has been doing a lot of really good peak prosperity. Pretty sure it's Chris Martenson. He's been doing a lot of really good research about it, and he's also good friends with Mike Maloney. So they've been doing a lot of good videos back to with each other, and also, like, focusing on the economy and how it's affecting the economy. But I think the biggest thing that I've been thinking about is just like the displacement that's going to happen, especially right now in China, where it's like people aren't working, and how that's slowly going to trickle down into how it affects us, right? Like the goods that we get, I've heard different numbers talking about, like, I think it's something crazy, like 90 something % of the prescriptions that we get come from China.
Yeah.
So just like this mass amount of, these mass amounts of prescriptions that might be backlogged for multiple months, right?
Well, yeah, and then I also heard that even the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture in the United States, they get the chemicals for their drugs from China. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they basically have a stranglehold on a number of industries.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think, I don't think people will start to see that until like a few months later, really start to see how that affects us. We're so used to just getting everything on a silver platter. And so, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. And I mean, obviously also just like seeing the effects of that in the stock market, how that's going to affect people too. And, again, I think it just comes back to these manipulated markets. And I mean, I can't say one way or the other. I'm pretty against just investing in the stock market. One, because I'm not very old. And so when I was able to start that, it was already pretty high. And to me, it's like, I'm not going to start investing in something that's already like beyond what it's been in such a long time, right? Like, I think that's a pretty foolish way of investing. Usually, obviously, most people want to buy low and sell it when it's higher. And so if you're already up so much, but so it'll be interesting to see just kind of the ramifications of this stock market from these fears that people are having, and we've already seen that within the last few weeks of it dropping. But again, it's just this continual climb. It can't keep going on that way, and so it has to come down at some point.
Yeah, and you and I have had this conversation for a long time, and I've been waiting for the recession for maybe a year. I don't even know. And I have always been convinced that it was going to be driven by the 2020 election. And I think there's a number of reasons it could or would happen if Trump wins. I think there's a number of reasons it would or could happen if Bernie Sanders wins. It's probably the same for Biden. I think it would be worse for Bernie because, in my opinion, Trump is very beneficial to the markets because he's so corrupt. Mm-hmm. And so he's able to manipulate things because he is able to be manipulated. And so there are a ton of people making money off him right now. Mm-hmm. And Bernie comes in and tries to start to reset things. I think it will be significant. But I also think Trump winning again, like you were just saying, something has to happen. Mm-hmm. It's been 11 years of positive growth, the longest time period of positive growth in American economic history. Mm-hmm. And it can't keep going up forever. Something has to happen. Mm-hmm. And now with all the coronavirus stuff that's happening, I wonder if that's going to be the thing that does it. Because it's like, it's fucking up everything right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, or it's going to be, I guess, or I don't know, some things that I've been listening to about is like, is it going to be kind of like the cover up for it to just to happen anyways, right? Like, okay. Are we going to be able to say, oh, this is why it happened, right? It's a good cover for maybe something that was going to come, rather than it being like, yeah, it was going to come anyways, but this is the specific reason why it happened. It's kind of some stuff I've been listening to, and also a really interesting point that I kind of listened to was that like 2 days ago, the Fed came out and I think it was cut interest rates by like a 0.5 point, and the market reacted immediately very positively. But then directly after that just continued to fall. And that's really never happened before within the last 10 years. That's not something that usually happens. And so really recognizing that these policy manipulations that they have to use aren't working. And what does that end up, what happens when that, that is what happens. It starts to go down, right? Like people lose confidence in it. And so that's like a key point of understanding that like there's only so much manipulation that you can do. And really getting into interest rates too, like we're moving towards negative interest rates. And that's like a whole nother world that we've never been in. I believe Europe and Japan are in negative interest rates, but what really happens when the money that you have in your savings, you're paying to keep there, right? Like that's all negative interest rates are is, instead of making money off it, you are now losing money. So
you're saying like the returns on a savings account, not the rate that like a bank would offer to loan or to let you buy a house.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's, and that might be part of it too. Again, I would say there's a lot of people that talk about it more in depthly than I could, but from what I understand, from more so from like a savings portion of it, and it also plays into money creation too, but you're just going to be losing money in general. We've never had negative interest rates before. That was never a concept that people would ever want to move into. Like that's not something that we'd want to go to, but it's already happening, and a lot of officials are like pushing for it. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, it's really weird when the first thing happened in 2008, 2009, I was 24, 25, and I was really just kind of entering the real job market, and people were talking about it, and I didn't really understand because I didn't have anything else to compare it to, And so now we've had 10 years where things have been on the up and up, and it's hard to anticipate what's going to happen and how bad it's going to be. And most definitely there's going to be a lot of people who benefit from it. And I'm trying to be one of those people. I'm waiting for the housing market to come down because it's just so ridiculous right now.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It's like, why can't there be some sort of balance? Why does it have to be so extreme?
Mm-hmm. I think that comes with the manipulated markets, where people are not letting. That's kind of what like a lot of anarchists and people that I listen to talk about. Libertarians too, like allowing freedom in the sense of having markets actually do what they should be doing, right? Whereas pushing out the bad, pushing out the old, pushing out something that shouldn't be succeeding, in the sense of like banks that went down in 2008, instead of letting those banks completely go away, pouring more money into them to keep them afloat, which, maybe there's some good points that like maybe worse things would have happened if they didn't do that. But I think if that would have happened, a lot of people would have got hurt. A lot of people would have lost their jobs. There probably would have been, a lot of unfortunate things that happened. But from that, we could have built upon something new, and that didn't happen. And so
you're referring to like the bailout of like some of the large banks in 2008.
Yeah. It was all just manipulated money. It's quantitative easing. That's when quantitative easing started, was the manipulation of the Federal Reserve pumping money into the system to keep it afloat and to pump it back up. And so, it's kind of like, what would have happened if that didn't happen, right? A lot of people seem to think that we would have been a lot better off. Of course, a lot of people, again, would have lost their jobs, lost a lot of money, and got hurt. But who's to say that that's not still going to happen?
Yeah.
I would think that it needs to happen, right? It has to happen.
Yeah. That's the best way to learn, is make a mistake, Learn
from your mistakes.
Yeah. 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 Getting back to taxes and income tax, it's so disappointing that you can't choose what to spend your money on. There is such a significant portion of the government's payroll that goes towards the defense budget.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point in time, there's so many people that are upset about freeloaders taking money from the system and not working and getting food stamps and this and that and the other. And I don't think people understand how much is actually spent on defense. And that, I mean, I forget what the figure is. I'm sure you've seen it. It's like our defense budget is greater than the next 15 countries combined, something of that nature.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what we were talking about with war. And if we're constantly in pursuit of war and invading other countries to help them, we need the biggest, strongest defense that we can muster.
Yeah, and I think too, it just creates so much fear, right? There's so much fear that's created around that to keep people from, exploring different areas, to keep people from leaving the system or seeing that there's something better, something more. I think for me, that's a big thing that I've been thinking about, being able to go somewhere else and potentially live somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's something that I want to explore, that is in the works currently. And I think will definitely happen. I think, I've traveled a little bit, not tons of places, but I think from that travel, you definitely learn a lot and you see how other people interact, and you also see how there is a lot of propaganda here.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And can you escape it though? If you move to another country, you're not beholden to our policies in the United States, and you get to live a different way. But the question I'm trying to ask is the end goal for there to be no boundaries? Do you think that could ever happen?
Like no borders thing?
Yeah.
I think it could happen. I don't know if it will happen anytime soon, right? Like it's happened at one point. I think there would have to be a lot of people that wouldn't be around anymore, I guess, wouldn't be in power.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's very unlikely that it would happen that way. But, a big thing that I think about with wanting to be somewhere else or move somewhere else is one, the U.S. is one of two countries that continually taxes its citizens, even when they live outside the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of coming back to the concept of, live where you're treated best or go where you're treated best. I don't think the U.S. treats its citizens the best. And not to say that, like, sure, other places aren't, there's not great, it's not perfect if you go somewhere else, totally. And so, but I think I also kind of struggle with, wanting to be somewhere else and maybe thinking that it's going to be so much better than here. But I think a big part of it is like just the crazy amount of taxation that happens here, and especially being somewhere else. And, I think it is easier in many places to start a business and to have different bank accounts and to bank in different places. I think a lot of people don't really think about that, like, especially growing up in the US, we think that we're from here, that we have to be here, that we have to, pledge our allegiance to here and all that kind of stuff. And it's a lot of propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what interests me in exploring other places and potentially exploring, completely living other places and, maybe even renouncing my citizenship. I think that's that's not something that comes easily in any way, shape, or form, but it's something that I think about, right?
So what does that mean though, other than you making a statement that you're disappointed with something? Like, is there some sort of legal benefit to doing that?
Yeah, totally. I don't think it would be that I'm disappointed. I think it would more so be that, like, at least in, maybe it would be, but at least in my eyes, it would be like the system that I see here. I don't really want to interact with that system anymore. I don't want to be paying my money, like you're talking about, to this giant defense budget.
Sure. So
I think, like, just on a personal level, to not support that is something that I like. I think that would be good for my psyche, good for, just me in general. But I think, it also, a big part of it would be coming back to the taxation part, right? Of if I go somewhere and say I make, and there's a line where you have to make so much money. But if you do make a good amount of money, at some point you do have to pay back to the US, even if you're not even living here. And it's a huge, huge part of it.
You're saying while you're a citizen. And so that would be a benefit of renouncing your citizenship.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, it's a very large decision. It's not something that I could say right now. I mean, I still live here. I would also have to get a different passport. I would have to, look at other places to live. You'd have to, find citizenship somewhere else because you have to have a passport to travel. So.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing about I know at least in Australia, because I remember a friend of mine who was going to move there. And if I remember correctly, he obviously had to buy a plane ticket there, but he had to have the money for a return plane ticket to leave. And he also had to have, I don't know, $3,000 or something like that. So basically like $6,000 set aside so that when they say we're done with you, you can leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've been currently looking into going to New Zealand. And so it's the same thing where you have to have, it depends on what visa you're applying for and all that kind of stuff. But the easiest one, at least if someone that's under 30, is the holiday visa. And so you have to pay for, obviously, your plane ticket there. Yeah. You have to have enough money to get back and enough money to, or at least show them that you have enough money to support yourself to get back. And then also I think it's like you have to have either healthcare there or you have to have healthcare back here so that you're not just going to mooch off their system.
Yeah. And at that point, even if you were able to secure all that, you still have to go there and somehow find a job, right?
Mm-hmm. But you can work on a holiday visa, actually. Yeah, New Zealand's visas are actually pretty good. You can on the holiday visa one, which is a 1-year visa, that's for anyone under 30. You can go. You can work on that, which is pretty rad.
Yeah.
And I know in Australia, actually, I was looking into that one too. They have a program where I think it's if you want to stay another year, you just have to do 3 months of specific labor. That's like helping them in some way. So it could be like working on a garden working on a farm or working in like hospitality. It's like these specific jobs. And then if you want to stay beyond that year, you have to do like another 6 months. And then beyond that is another portion of your work, basically showing them that you want to be there. So
it's basically I can't think of the word. What's the thing that they make you do? Community service. It's basically community service, right?
I mean, you get paid for it, so I think it's a little bit better than community service.
It's not like you. Something. Yeah, it's not like you were going to go to jail for 6 months and then you went and played in the garden instead.
Now you can do community service.
Yeah,
it's a little bit better than that.
Yeah,
but yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. It interests me, but obviously, it's also like, is it going to be better? Is it going to be something different? Is it going to be, something that I want to go do and I'm going to be fulfilled out of it? I'm not sure.
Well, then at that point, say it didn't work out and you weren't happy and you're like, America's awesome, I'm coming back. Like, how hard is it to get back in the States?
Oh, so are you talking about if you've already renounced your citizenship?
Yes.
Okay, that's a whole.
Are they just like, story. Fuck you, New Zealander?
Oh, see, that's a whole different story. I didn't realize we were talking about if you completely renounced your citizenship. Well, if you're completely renouncing your citizenship, I believe you'd already have to have something set up to have another residency.
Yeah, because otherwise you're like a non-citizen, right?
Yeah, which I mean, I know there's people that have done it too. Honestly, I don't even know what happens then. But I think most people, at least the people that I've heard from that have done it, you would already have something lined up. And so it wouldn't be like the holiday visa thing. That's more so if you're just wanting to go explore and see other places.
Okay. Just temporary.
Yeah. I think you actually have to have a passport to get into the holiday visa. And so I don't think it would even be an option to renounce your citizenship and then do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's an interesting concept. I've also heard I've heard mixed things, which I would need to look into it a little bit more. That like actually, Mike Maloney was saying that I think something crazy like he would have had to pay. You have to pay a specific amount of money, like a few $1,000s to do it, and then he was saying something along the lines of they take a portion of your wealth, which I haven't heard. Yeah, again, it's something I want to look into more, but that's what he was saying. And then another person I was listening to, I don't think ever mentioned that. So I'm not 100% sure about that, but I could also see it. I mean, trying to get as much money out of you as you can before you leave.
Yeah. Well, transitioning, I wanted to talk to you about your thoughts on global warming and
I don't know if I want to dive into that. I don't know, man. Yeah.
Because because the only reason I ask you is because you have a unique perspective that is not consistent with most of your other views, and that's what I appreciate about it. Because there's a number of ways to look at the whole concept.
Yeah. A lot of what I do in my free time is just try to educate myself with other people who know these topics more than I do and who have studied them. So I'm just going to kind of tell some other people that if people are interested in these topics, they should go look at, because these are where I get some of my ideas from. But this guy called the Suspicious Observer is a really cool YouTube channel who focuses a lot on just the sun, basically, like in all aspects of the sun and understanding how the sun interacts with the world, with Earth, and also with space in general. And he brings up some really, really interesting concepts. It's kind of related to energy moving out of the sun and interacting with us and heating and cooling. And also James Corbett does a lot of really great videos talking about global warming. I don't think I'm going to go too deep into it, in my opinion. I mean, I agree with a lot of what these people say, but I think I guess I just think that there's a lot of money to be made around it and kind of propaganda that has people thinking that we're the sole problem, and that our interaction with Earth and the things that we do, with driving cars and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that it doesn't affect it, but I don't think it affects it in the amount that we're told.
Okay.
I think that there is a long history of the Earth changing that we don't think about. And I think a lot of that is to do with the sun. And again, I think if people want to learn more about that, the Suspicious Observer goes into that.
Yeah. I mean, all you can really do is read and learn and listen and formulate your own opinions. And the most human characteristic, the human characteristic I appreciate most is that of a person who is willing to be open-minded and go with something new. Anybody who firmly plants their foot down for anything is not somebody I can have a conversation with. And so, I mean, because science, the whole point of science is that you study and test and study and test, and you prove something, and you try to prove without a reasonable doubt that it exists. But then 100 years later, someone can come along and prove that theory wrong.
Yeah.
And I, from what I've read and what I understand, believe it to be fact that man is in one way or another affecting the Earth. I think that's pretty indisputable.
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, again, I think it comes back to how much that actually is.
Exactly.
Another conversation. Yeah.
In that vein, I think people get too too buried in their little lives that last 80 years long, and they're incapable of understanding the scope of the universe and the scope of this planet and of the sun. And while I think and understand man to be responsible for a ton of horrible shit that's going on right now, plastic in the ocean, holes in the ozone layer, I think what you were saying is true as well. That the Earth moves in cycles. There are ice ages. There are certain events that change things on a scope that we're unable to understand because time is so huge. And I was having this conversation with my dad just like a week ago, and I was like, you know what? We're not that important. No one cares. The Earth doesn't care. The ocean doesn't care. It's going to be here. I think the sun will burn out in like 4 billion years, and then everything's dead. You know, then nothing exists. Then it's just a rock. Okay, but until that time, I mean, we could get wiped out tomorrow. It doesn't matter, really. And I don't think that's an excuse to further destroy everything we have and kill everything, but like we don't matter, and people don't want to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, everyone wants to think that they're this unique snowflake, right? That everything they do has a purpose and matters, but some people think that, and that's cool.
And that's cool.
But no, I agree with you. I think just the time that we spend here is just so short-lived, and that's something that I definitely think about a lot, right? I think about the time that I'm doing, whatever with understanding this information. Like, is that my time used best? Yeah, it's great. I'm understanding things, but I think within the last few years, I've really done the most growth in myself, from trying to connect and be present. And a lot of that is through yoga. And a lot of that is through, trying to better myself and really understand like what I want out of life. And it's not easy at all. There's so much going on, such complexity, just moving around and creating new, community and all that kind of stuff. But I think people really need to take the time to really, understand how your body's feeling and breathing. Like, that's all yoga is taking the time to be present, to breathe, to focus on the now, to focus on what's going on. And I think you will start to find a lot more joy in life. And also just like losing distractions, right? Like we have hundreds and hundreds of distractions around us. And so being able to like sit and read a book and being able to even just sit in silence and do that is super powerful.
How long have you been doing yoga?
Let's see, I hurt my back at work 3 years ago.
That's it?
3.5 years ago. I think about that long. Yeah. I mean, I did a little bit before that, but not to the point where I'm doing it now, where I try to do it every day.
Yeah. And how long after starting that practice did you realize it was that beneficial to you? And you're like, holy shit, I should do this all the time.
One, it was helping my back a ton, but then also just like helping my mind and helping my body to really just chill out. And honestly, like, breathing is a big part of it, of just like understanding your breath and really being present with your breath and helping you through the day, no matter what it is, or, not overreacting to something, because you're able to like breathe through it and you're able to calm down.
Yeah. I have noticed the biggest change in my stress level and interaction with people since I started doing it, and since I started working out and running. Like it just like brings you down to a different level. Like
definitely.
shit just doesn't bother you anymore, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's part of the reason why. My girlfriend and I are, well, I guess I already used her name. Why Amy and I are looking at going somewhere else. There's like a big thing that she wants and to implement into her life is a better work-life balance, and that's something that I've tried to, and I actually have been able to implement because more so now working for myself. I'm able to have more time to focus on that type of stuff. And also like other countries focus a lot more on that. And so that's one benefit. And I think something that attracts us about going somewhere else is not just like the daily grind of constantly working, constantly, focusing on someone else's work too. Like that's a big thing that I definitely have found that I enjoy is working for myself. And having that availability of saying when I want to and when I don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty huge.
Mm-hmm.
You figured it out. You just get to be your own boss.
Parts of it. Still learning.
You quit your day job and you get more work now.
That's also true.
Except when coronavirus is around.
Yeah, seriously, not that.
Yeah.
It's taking a lot of work away from me.
Yeah. Well, right on, dude. I feel like maybe we should wrap this up for now. There's like 1,000 other things I want to talk to you about, but I think we could wrap this one up and do another one at a different time. Maybe
sounds good.
Maybe in person.
Yeah.
The next one.
That'd be good.
Cool. All right, dude.
Cool, man.
Well,
thank you. This is fun.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for coming on.